lots of feedback. Can you see?
Yes.
Welcome to your awakening. Please take form as your reality is adjusted. Oh, I missed the stop button then. Wasn't quick enough. Welcome, folks. Good evening. Greetings and well met, and quick mute the sound so that it doesn't feedback. I thought we might get feedback on that, but hopefully it's come through all right. Close that window and close that window and close that window and open that one and that one and that one and that one and click loads of stuff. Click, click, click. Right. Hello. Welcome back again, folks. Greetings and well met on this Moon Day evening, star date 11 of the 3rd of 2019. I had to say it 3 times then just to be sure. The third. Yes, March 11th, 2019. Just gone 9 p.m. GMT, 2100 hours. And I'll say a quick hello to everyone in the chat room. Hello. Lots of Tatro. Hello, mate. Thanks for joining the conversation on Friday night as well. I know it was another long one. So I'm glad you stuck it out. And Dave Iron, hello. And Simon Boyle, hello. And then that's Peter and Gary, hello. I don't know whether how far the reach will be for this particular broadcast, because it seems now that the Google Plus is done and over with. We're not at the end of March, beginning of April yet, which was when the official date for the end of it, I think, was April 2nd. But now you can no longer share to Google Plus. I was trying it earlier. I tried to share other people's shows and whatever, and you can't anymore. And I don't know if the pages that were there on Google Plus are now gone and deleted, or whether they're just in the background and no longer functioning or something. But yeah, please be aware that Google Plus is now over and done with. So sharing broadcasts and shows and videos and stuff like that is not possible anymore. So numbers of people who might turn up will probably be less. But if you have other platforms you want to share it on, go for it if you can. Gary, you still got Google Plus there, yeah? I haven't been able to access mine. Whenever I click on it, it just fails. It gives me an error. So I can't get to it. But yeah, if you can share it anywhere else, please do so. If you're inclined to, of course. And do all that usual thing that you're supposed to say when you're a YouTube channel creator. I hardly ever bother saying it, click like, click share, subscribe, ring my bell, do all that stuff that you're supposed to do with YouTube stuff, which if you are a viewer of YouTube stuff, you're already aware of. So, constantly saying it at the beginning or at the end of every bloody broadcast to me just seems to be redundant. That's why I don't say it most of the time. There's not really much point doing it. And I meant to send some other invites out, and as per usual, I forgot. So I'll do that while I'm talking. Did I copy the right link? I hope so. Otherwise, I'll be sending people something they've got no idea what it means, but just sending people random messages. So yes, we are back again. Another crazy week. I haven't put much in my notes this week because it's been somewhat similar as it has been for a number of weeks now, certainly here in the UK anyway, because at the moment in the UK we're just heavily saturated with political chaos. And at the moment, for the last week or more, it's been ongoing for a while, but the last week's worth of news media has been heavily saturated with stories to do with knife crime. So, it's not exactly like there's been any major incidents to report so far here in the UK. cray cray May May. I think that might become a new T-shirt or meme. You know, Theresa May is a bit cray cray. So cray cray May May. And there's been a few articles about her struggling to deal with the terrible pressure and how she's trying so hard. She's doing such a fantastic job at being a sacrificial lamb to push the vehicle of the agendas over the cliff edge. But, you know, trying to get the public to sympathize for her and how she's supposedly working so hard. It's, yeah. I know the media likes to make us feel like morons, and they like to try and convince us that the majority of people in the country are idiots, but you know, it's not true. It's not a truism to use in an absolute fashion like that. Yeah, of course there's some idiots, of course there's some morons, but it doesn't mean everybody is. And trying to tell us that we are supposed to believe the bullshit that they're coming out with because supposedly everybody else believes it. The general public opinion believes it. Nah, that's just what you paint in the media. That's just how you want people to feel. That's what you want them to think is going on. So, yeah, we're going in little circles. And as it was, the 10th episode of season 2, the way I've been labeling it, as I talked about before, I started changing the titles of the show in this fashion. And I said quite a while ago that I might start just putting a episode number, series and episode number. And if I count all the previous shows that had a full title on as being part of series 1, then now we're in series 2, obviously. And we're now up to episode 10. Been 10 broadcasts since the beginning of the year because I started doing it at the beginning of this year. And number 10 is a culmination, but it's also a return to the beginning, the 1 and the 0 again. So I thought, well, it's worth talking about things that seem to have been repeating, saying the same old stuff again and again. That's what I thought, you know, the only thing that's in the subtitle is retro convo. Let's have a conversation about some of those kind of retrospective things. 2020 hindsight is 2020. I should say, get it right. If you're going to use a cliche, at least get it right. Hindsight is 2020. You know, when you look back at things, it's much easier to see them with a bit more clarity, and a lot of the patterns don't emerge unless you're looking back in time in that fashion. So, you know, things sometimes need a retrospective view. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to go retro and, you know, start wearing clothing that's from 20 years ago or whatever, although I was still sort of wearing, you know, the same fashion I was wearing in the 90s. So I'm not going retro. I just never left. You know, I was still there. That's what some people would say anyway. But the only other stuff I've got in my notes that's been going on over the week, last week and the week before, I think I was speculating on the situation in Venezuela and what would possibly happen in the coming week, that they would more than likely try and stage something or push hard enough such that they would initiate some kind of South American Spring effect in Venezuela. And there would be an excuse and a call to take the Western allies in to, you know, bring democracy to the people, to, you know, rain down some democracy on them, and to drop some love bombs on them to moderately kill most of the population into submission. But anyway, yeah, you know, I was speculating that that was probably going to kick off over the last week, and it hasn't yet got to that stage. So I'm glad to say I was wrong in that speculation so far. They are blocking out or reducing the reach of a lot of the media that is looking at the Venezuelan situation and wanting to talk about what's going on over there. So there is somewhat of a media blackout. It's not truly total. And if anything, some of it is being used as like a alternative media victim excuse to grab people's attention. But that's just typical of the media marketplace. You know, people use any excuse to try and get your attention, any old bullshit to grab some headlines and whatever. but they haven't managed to push the situation far enough to create a similar effect that we've seen in other places in the world over the last few years. I've described it before as the kind of proxy blitzkrieg effect, where they'll destabilize a country, cause it to become fractured, like the public becoming fractured within that country, such that they start a civil uprising, a civil war, a civil revolution in one way or another. A lot of the time it happened in such a way that it begins somewhat peacefully with protests and general strikes and things like that. As a side note, supposedly there was a general strike in India to complain about the situation that's going on over Kashmir at the same time. But that's how it begins, and then it gets steadily more violent until some tragedy or catastrophe occurs, and then the international community can step up and go, oh, we need to go in and save them for humanitarian reasons. You know, we've got to rain some democracy on them. But so far it hasn't got that bad, I'm glad to say. I'm glad to be wrong. A lot of the time, I haven't said it for ages, but a lot of the time, that's a big part of what I'm doing here. I'm pointing at bad potential so that hopefully people spot them and steer the other direction. It's like pointing out hidden rocks under the surface of the water, you know, so don't go that way. You're going to get crashed and fucked if you go that way, and people will steer the other way, hopefully. And I mean, obviously I'm not delusional into thinking that what I say has an influence on Anglo-American policy. No, I'm talking to people, the general populace, not to the politicians, because they don't give a shit. They don't listen. Even if they did listen, you'll see that like just vacant look in their eyes. Well, they claim they're listening to you. They're not. They're busy thinking about what else they can put on expenses. Like they need some new underwear, so they're going to get their expenses card out to buy some new underpants. What you say to the political system doesn't matter. Trying to utilize the political system to change the direction of the state, of the world situation, it's not going to happen. You can say that's just my opinion. Okay, I'm all right with that. If you want to say it's just my opinion, we'll carry on and see what happens. And if I'm proven to be wrong, great. I'm glad to be wrong. But for a lot of these things, I don't think I am wrong. And that's why I keep talking about this stuff, because some of this stuff is just repeating again and again and again. We're back to number 10. Start at number 1 again. Repeat the cycle. Count through the stepping stones and see the narrative appear as you keep ending up in the same place. Go back to number 1. Revolution. Go back to the beginning. Reset and start again. And you wonder why they insert that kind of psyop into the environment, because they want people to have that thought in their head of, oh, we just need to press a reset button, everything start again, and then this time it will all be lovely. We just need to put a different face on the throne, and then this time it'll all be lovely. It doesn't work. That's part of the trickery. That's part of their game, to make you think that something like that is possible, and to pin all your hopes on even just the possibility of it happening, even if it's not potentially literally happening in your lifetime. They just want you to believe that it's possible, so that you keep going along with the system, thinking, yeah, in a minute now somebody will fix it, something will happen that will cause it to reset, and we can start again with better people and all that kind of shit. And thinking about this stuff over the week and over the weekend, and talking with Jeff C. and friends on Friday night, I joined in with another broadcast again. Yeah, I did stay up all night again on Friday night. I drank far too much coffee, ended up sleeping for most of the weekend, but I joined in with it. And it was just some of the stuff we were talking about during that conversation. It's another good one if you're interested to listen, but it is, again, it's another long one. It's about 7 hours long, I think. So if you want to approach, tuning in for a conversation that's 7 hours long. But some of the stuff we was talking about reminded me again, going in doing that circle thing. A political awakening leads to a spiritual awakening. And if you really want to see major changes in the way the world situation is playing out, and a lot of these big narratives and agendas that they're trying to drive the mass of the populace towards or along these particular routes, then trying to utilize or rely on the political structure, which is a key intrinsic part of that whole situation. It's like the engine that's dragging the rest of us along in its wake. You know, the engine is driving a certain direction, and one way or another, we all get pulled along behind it in its wake. But that engine is not the solution. It's not usable in a fashion that it will actually genuinely, in a complete sense, alleviate or deal with a lot of these agendas and narratives and problems that we end up talking about again and again and again. The political awakening process, I found for myself, and I see it in other people, and I've seen it repeated again and again. The political awakening process helps people realize that the political system itself can only be used to a certain degree, and expecting to be able to use it to deal with the problems at hand and the things that are going on is a delusional expectation that ends up slowing you down and stopping your own progress. And really it's about authority in a psychological way, but also in an energetic fashion. It's about authority. That's what it comes down to. And the political awakening is people going through that process of realizing that those who claim authority over them, those people who supposedly sit in a position of power, either as part of a royal aristocracy or part of a supposedly elected political class, whatever, their claims are all just that. They're just claims. There is no validity to them unless you choose to give them validity. And that choice of abdication of authority is the process that creates what we call a political system. So once you start to see how that political engine is used primarily by people who don't have your welfare or well-being in their minds as any kind of value or concern, they don't give a fuck about you, basically. You know, George Carlin said it well as, you're not in that club. So if you're not in that club, as far as they're concerned, you're just detritus, or you're just a labor force to serve their purposes. When you start to go through those kind of realizations and see how, well, all their claims to authority are only given any kind of validity if I choose to go along with them. As soon as I say no, or as soon as I say, no, I refute your claim to authority over me, I'm not your slave, then they resort to a classic tyrannical control method of the use of force, the use of violence to dominate others, to do their will, to do their bidding. That political realization is like, you can compare it as an analogy to the process of growing to adulthood and leaving the family home. When you're a child, you see your parents as being the ultimate authorities within your world. They're the ones that decide things for you. They're the ones that care for you. They provide for you. They look after you, etc., etc., etc. They are, in effect, like the gods of your world, for want of a better descriptor. You know, they are the beings that define your reality. And then you grow older and you start to see more of the rest of the world, and you go through your own development process, which leads you psychologically to becoming an adult, which is a process of leaving that family home and going out into the big wide world. So your home goes from the family unit to the rest of the world. And then you begin that next development process, which is the realization process, in the same manner of you becoming like a political adult. So you start to realize that the pseudo parents, I'm doing a hell of a lot of bunny ears tonight, so the pseudo parents that are those who claim authority, like the politicians or royalty, etc., they are just that. They're pseudo parents. So you can develop beyond that as well, because they're not really your parents. They are just psychologically influencing you in such a way that whether you're conscious of it or not, you perceive them fulfilling the same role that your biological or your carers would do when you were a child. So what's the next, where do you go from beyond that world picture, when your home is the world, and then you grow up and outgrow those pseudo adults? The only next level is the everything. I say the only next level, like, I'm setting a definition here, but really I think that is what it comes to. It's the next step beyond, or the next process beyond that, is the spiritual awakening of, well, if they're not an authority, if these people are politicians or whatever that have this claim, if they're not the authority, then who or what is the authority within this reality? And this is all coming from a point of view where hopefully you have the cognitive ability and self-awareness to be able to consider these kind of things without falling into the number 6 spiral downwards trap of believing that it's you. You fall into that solipsistic inversion of going, well, if they're not the authority and there's no other external authority, then it must be me. I am the ultimate authority. Everything exists just because of me. And you end up in that solipsistic, crushing singularity of delusion. So hopefully you're aware enough to not get caught up in that trap. You keep exploring out beyond that parental home that you are leaving, that psychological home, spiritual, energetic home that you are leaving. So a lot of this stuff comes round in repetitions. When it comes to the media and the propaganda that gets pumped out at the general populace day after day, the news cycle repeats, usually every hour, on the hour, the 24-hour news channels will repeat the latest news. Little cycles become bigger cycles, but they're all interlinked, they're all intertwined. And sometimes things are occurring, things are happening around you in the reality you're experiencing in the world. When you're looking out at that information or looking for information as it's being moved around out there, you see those repetitions. It's like, I've heard this story before. I've seen this MO before. I'll mention this now and sort of it's just relevant in terms of talking about this kind of stuff as well, to say it now. Listening to the Raconteurs News guys earlier, I say a big shout out to Jason and Webby. They had a guest on tonight, Scott Bullitt. And I say a big shout out deliberately because I've noticed that since last week, where I made my own point about certain information and certain topics that are quite often discussed in this environment, that seems to have hit a nerve. And now I'm persona non grata. And I don't get a mention, I don't get a shout out anymore. Even though I'll still do my thing. I'm in the chat, I'll happily chat to people and whatever. If it's stuff I'm interested in, I'll join in the conversation. But now I'm not mentioned, even to the point where I'm now just somebody. Yeah. Which is sort of like, okay, guys, that's what you want to do. You carry on. Yeah, that's what you're doing. It's your stuff. You do it how you choose to do it. But these repetitions of like, well, as far as I'm concerned, I ain't done nothing wrong. All I did is point out my point of view on certain stuff. And that seems to, like be kicking the hornet's nest a bit. There you go. Thanks, Super Leads. Hello, Super Leads in the chat. I'll come back to the chat in a sec. I know there's been a few other people joined, so I'd say hello to who I've missed out so far. Thank you. Super Leads just mentioned in the chat they did give me a shout out at the end of the show. Thank you. I know this sounds somewhat almost nepotistic, talking about that kind of networking of giving each other a shout out and stuff like that. And there is an element of that within this environment where the one other thing I put in my notes was the state stumping speech, which is difficult for me to say without teeth, but the state stumping speech. One of the other things that's been happening over the last week, if you haven't noticed, I'm sure most people listening to this are well aware of this kind of stuff happening. There's been various closing in on free speech that's been going on over the last week, the last few weeks, the last months. But last week in particular, there's been a few people that have been shut down. Some channels have been shut down. Some people have been arrested. Supposedly one person in particular is going to be going back to jail soon, yeah? And there's certain conversations that get shut down fairly quickly. There's certain information that gets shut down quite quickly. In this atmosphere at the moment, even, and I'm sort of speaking from extended anecdotal knowledge or information, because I don't use Facebook, so I don't experience this shit happening. But I've heard more and more people now say, yeah, all I was doing was posting about something that's going on that I feel, I've got strong feelings about, and I've been blocked or I've been banned or I've been put on the naughty shelf for the next 2 weeks or something like that. This is happening now more and more and more, to such a degree that even the general populace seems to be now becoming painfully aware that this is a reality. This is not something that us crazy tinfoil hat people on the internet are always talking about, because I've been saying this since I started doing this stuff, that this kind of thing is going to start happening. Now, more and more people are seeing it, even people who are not crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists into some of the weird out there topics that I often talk about. More and more people are experiencing it now. It's becoming the reality for them. It's very quickly going to become the norm, and people will acclimatize themselves to this new environment where it's like, oh, I'm going to go on Facebook and, oh, I better not mention certain subjects. I might get a social credit demerit, and then, I won't be able to travel abroad or something. People are acclimatizing themselves to it. That is a big, big danger warning. And so I digressed a bit. Give the Raconteurs News guys a big shout out, because the main reason I wanted to mention it, they were talking to a guest tonight, Scott Bullitt. I didn't hear it all the way up to the end, so I didn't get to hear what he was saying towards the last part of the show, because I'm usually setting up this, so I missed some of it. But he was talking about his situation dealing with the state system, the judiciary, the legal system, trying to foreclose or close in on his mother's estate, claiming that she was suffering from dementia, so they were taking over the estate and basically trying to legally elbow him and his family out so that they could take everything that his mother had. And he's been fighting against that. But the reason I wanted to mention it is this is a story that is not new. The guy talks about a hell of a lot of good information. If people don't know about this kind of thing, it's worth listening to that and listening to what he's talking about in terms of how he's approaching the problem and how he's trying to deal with the situation, how he's trying to make use of the legal and lawful structure to try and get the situation dealt with or sorted out to his benefit, not letting the state steal from them, exploit them. But the problem is, it is a repeat of the same story I've heard again and again and again for years. And his case, his situation, is a very tiny percentage of the whole picture. Because somebody like him is few and far between. Somebody who actually goes to the effort, makes a stand and says, no, what's going on here? And actually makes the effort to go and learn, expand his own knowledge, find out about how he can try and deal with the situation, how to approach it. He's one of a very small percentage of people. The vast majority of people that this stuff happens to are probably not even aware of what's being done to them. let alone having any ability to be able to go, hang on a minute, no, let's, I need to do this to try and alleviate the situation or deal with it. And these are the cycles that the state makes use of, because it knows full well that while somebody like him may be a little bit of a thorn in their side, when it comes to it, all they'll do is, like he himself described, they'll lay hands on him, they'll put him in a cell, and they'll hold him there for as much as they can. And they might bring him out again, bring him back into court and ask him the same old bullshit questions. And when he doesn't give the responses that they expect or demand, they just put hands on him again and take him down again. And the state keeps doing this. And while his situation, his case, may take many years to play out, and he might learn a little bit from it, maybe he will survive at least. He might even, better his own situation, hopefully. But it's going to take a long time. And during that time, thousands of others have been suffered from the same exploitative abuse by the state system. And I'm saying the state system, yes, it's people who are corrupt within the system who are using the system to do this to others. But the system allows for it. If anything, the system desires it. It engenders the structure to allow this kind of stuff to happen, to enable it to happen. And when you find out more about things such as the care pathway ideology, and how stuff like that hasn't gone away, again, it hasn't gone away. It's still ongoing. It's still repeating. It's just it's not mentioned in the press much anymore, hardly at all. So people have forgotten about it, and they think, oh, well, it must have been dealt with. That Dr. Shipman has been dealt with, hasn't he? So stuff like this isn't happening anymore. The Liverpool care pathway was, they had the whistle blown on them, so this is all sorted out. It's not happening anymore, is it? Yes, it's still happening. So although, I'm grateful to somebody like him that he's doing what he's doing and he's learning what he's learning and sharing that information and knowledge with others, I still feel and think that this is not a solution. This is not a way to stop this shit from happening. It's not a way to change the ideological indoctrination that is corrupting people to such a point that they will do that to each other. When they're given the toolbox, i.e. the state system, the judiciary, they will use it in such a fashion to just exploit and abuse each other. Even kill off those that they don't give a shit about and just nick all their stuff. So trying to use the system, trying to use that political process to deal with what are supposedly political problems. They're not political problems. They're problems within people. They're problems within us, ourselves, and the structure that we create because of those problems within ourselves. And please do not take that personally. I'm not trying to say that we're all bad people and it's all our own fault and we should just shut up and get on with it because we're so dumb and stupid we can't think about anything and therefore it's our own stupid, dumb fucking fault. No. This is stuff that is done to all of us, the vast majority of us, by this state system. It indoctrinates us in such a way that we help to perpetuate it and protect it. That's what a parasite does. It convinces the host that the host needs the parasite. So then the host won't try and get rid of it. If anything, it protects it because it thinks it's part of itself. And that's what they've done to us psychologically, spiritually, energetically. They've convinced us that the system, is part of us, and it's not. It's a construct. It's an externalized abdication of responsibility and authority that creates a lot of convenience and comfort, but at the same time, it is a dangerous tool, like fire. Fire can be very, very useful, and it can be exceedingly dangerous. It can be fatal. So if you're not consciously aware of what the hell you're doing, hell, no pun intended, it just came out that way. If you don't know what the hell you're doing when you're utilizing fire as a tool, then you are a danger to yourself and the others around you. Expectation that this political system, this fire tool, can be used to stop a lot of these bigger agendas that are happening. A lot of the problems that people encounter in their day-to-day life, like the one described about the legal structure, the judiciary being used to exploit somebody and extract wealth from them. A lot of these problems are caused by bigger agendas, the filtering down, the compartmentalized filtering down effect of bigger ideological narratives. Eugenics is just one way of describing what they are doing by utilizing systems such as the care pathway. For them, it's efficiency. And I'm saying them like I'm addressing human individuals, but for a lot of them, they're in such a compartmentalized robot kind of psychology. They're not aware of the bigger picture of what they're doing. They're just rubber stamping shit. They're the unthinking bureaucrats that just move paper around within the system and cause things to happen. But it is a eugenics process that for them is about efficiency of the system. Older people, I mean, this is just using the care pathway kind of thing as the example, but this is applicable in many different parts of your life, daily life and long-term lifespan and whatever, like mortgage, the care pathway system. For them, it's about efficiency. Older people contribute a hell of a lot less to the machine of society than younger people. So as you get older, you become more of a burden on the resources of the machine. So the machine sees you as detrimental, so it wants to get rid of you as quickly as it can. You're like extra appendages or appendixes. It wants you cut off and got rid of. So they attempt to, sometimes it's not so subtle, but they attempt to subtly implement these schemes that basically slowly eradicate that inefficient part of the populace. So in other words, they kill off old people as quickly as they can, or they can get away with without it being obviously outright genocidal eugenics. But they do it at a rate that has plausible deniability. And they can go, oh, well, the NHS system's struggling so much, we have to clear beds. And these people are never getting better. They're only slowly getting worse and worse. So, we just shuffle the numbers around a bit of dehydration here, a bit of starvation there. And, before you know, she's dead now, is she? Oh, they're dead now, are they? Oh, yeah, we can clear those beds. Plausible deniability for what is blatantly a system of eugenics to eradicate those that the system finds to be inefficient. And attempting to use the system itself to alleviate or deal with such a problem is the naivety of a child still living under the rule of its parents. Or their parents, if you don't like the dehumanizing label of its, the gender-based label of its, but hopefully you get the analogy, the point of the analogy. It's the same thinking of a child questioning their adults of, well, why do you only buy certain kinds of food for the household? Mummy and Daddy, why do you only ever buy that kind of food? I don't like that kind of food. It makes my belly hurt, or it makes me feel hyperactive. I don't want to eat that stuff. But it's like parents are like, no, this is what you get. These are the choices in the cupboard that you choose from. I'm using a bit of a silly example to try and make the point, but in the same way, when we're turning to government, to politics, and trying to use the political system to deal with a machine that only cares about efficiency and pumping resources and wealth in a certain direction to a certain few that sit at the controls of that machine, you're not going to achieve anything, really. Hopefully, you might make difference to your own situation. You might help alleviate your own situation. You might even solve your own situation, but you're not changing that bigger narrative that's occurring to thousands of other people. And if you get close to being able to present information or example to others such that they could, be addressed to the thousands that have the same problem, the system will stomp on you. It will come along and stomp on your speech to prevent that information from spreading, because then it becomes a threat to the parasite. I sound a little bit like I'm chastising, and I felt a bit like that last couple of weeks with the stuff I've been talking about. I don't do this, and I don't say these things to be condescending because I'm just a git who likes talking down to people. This is the way I say it. Sometimes I know people find it offensive or uncomfortable or whatever. Your reaction is your reaction. It's not me. I'm saying what I say. If you want to tell me to F off, fine, do that. But I'm not saying this stuff to be condescending. This is about realizing that process, that an expectation of utilizing the political system to solve the general ills of your daily life. Those general problems are caused by that compartmentalized structure, trickle down effect. So if you think dealing with that little problem that's further down the pyramid is going to affect what's happening at the top of the pyramid, it's not. It doesn't go upwards, it goes downwards. That motion of control goes downwards, not up. Until we stop feeding that problem, and until we stop falling into that same psychology and the same spiritual domination, then it's not going to change. It will just carry on. If anything, the situation will grind as the system tightens itself towards efficiency. I think that's a lot of the reason why they developed the revolution machine, what I call the Phoenix Gate effect, where they'll generate a revolution such that it causes a reset of the current society that allows them to reset that tension. It's like over-tensioning a spring. This system can't help itself but drive towards efficiency. But in doing so, the way it emanates itself onto us becomes more and more overt. So therefore, it becomes more and more obvious that of a tyranny, it relies more on force and violence to control everybody, on control of information and freedom of speech and all the kind of things that we're often talking about, because it's driving towards efficiency of sustaining itself, perpetuating itself. So the only way they can release that tension in the spring is by having that revolution, doing a reset, doing a recycle, taking things back to the beginning, supposedly, under the proviso that the majority of the public have been convinced that the system itself still needs to remain in place. You can kill the king, but you can't burn down the throne. Not allowed. We'll quite happily let you kill the king, but no, you can't touch that throne. That throne has to stay there. And if you go anywhere near it, then yeah, that's when the real shit will start happening. And again, to reiterate, like I often do with this stuff, I'm not telling people that the answer is to go and burn stuff down or hang politicians or anything like that. That is playing their revolution game. There's a lot of things I could say about what is a solution, but the main one I wanted to sort of look at and talk about tonight is that political awakening leading to a spiritual awakening. I know for some people out there, they'll say, they'll have an attitude, or they'll have a personal point of view of like, oh, there is nothing else out there, mate. All this talk of spiritual is just bunkum. They're a materialist, they're an empiricist, they don't believe in anything like, other powers and shit like that. That's fair enough. If you genuinely pursue that process and you say that's the conclusions you came to, fair enough, that's your process. Yeah, that's where you're going, that's your direction. I have no problem with you doing that. I'm not a proselytizer. I'm not going to pursue you and go, oh, no, you must believe, you must believe. No, it's your choice, mate. You go in your direction. But I find that in general, that is not what occurs. The only time that usually occurs is when people reinforce their own denial. And the only way they can claim to be sticking to that atheistic, deterministic empiricism is because they reinforce their own denial. They get extra concrete and build up the walls even stronger and go, no, absolutely not, because. And they'll keep relying on the same cognitive dissonant arguments that they go back to in little revolutions. There is nothing else. Why? Because I say so. Not allowed to be nothing else. And it just makes me think of that Trigglypuff meme. Yeah. But I've found that in general, most people who genuinely follow that process through or go through their political awakening, they'll start to realize that all these people, because they're just people, all these people's claims to authority are just that, they're just claims. They're pretty much meaningless unless they serve a beneficial purpose for you and you choose to join in with them. So in other words, you're consenting to go along with that externalization of your own responsibility and authority. They can be utilized in that way. But you start to have that realization, you go, oh, all of this stuff is just like mechanisms that make things turn, cogs within the machine that make daily life move along in that mostly commercial fashion that we experience in the way they've structured the world at the moment. So mostly commercial. Yeah? The elements of our existence are not just about buying shit. Yeah? And there are some parts of society structure that still hold true to supporting that general existence, not just about consumerism, yeah. But the machine benefits a lot from consumerism, so that's a big portion of what goes on. But once you start getting out of that political or pseudo-parent obsession, then your next questions are moving outside of that bubble, outside of that theatre. And then you can start considering things such as, well, if these people are making use of these illusions and delusions and trickery and stuff like that, what is their purpose in doing so? What are they benefiting out of this? Cui bono? Who benefits? And how does that play out as time goes on? You know, where are these benefits that these people are accumulating? Where does that lead to for them, but also for the rest of us? If there's a knock-on effect from what they're doing to the rest of us, where is this all leading to? And I know that obviously doesn't sound like it's to do with spirituality or divinity, you know, questioning is there a God or what, anything. I know it isn't. But these are parts of that spiritual awakening that are all still relevant to those kind of questions. Are these people doing this stuff just because they're selfish, self-obsessed? They're just like their 5 sense physical pleasures, and they just want to sate themselves with so much stuff that it makes them feel complete in some fashion? Or is there some other driving force going on within them? You know, in a Christian theological point of view, what I've just described could be called satanic. All they care about is themselves and their own pleasures and their own benefit. Or is there something else driving them? Do they have other long-term goals? Are they serving another purpose or the purpose of another? And that's more like a Luciferian. A Luciferian isn't just serving themselves. They're serving a long-term agenda plan, a long-term goal. Yeah, and that's just using the Christian theological aspect as an example. You could apply that to all the religions and all the different institutions that are part of that structure, as well as the sort of transition between the political infrastructure and the spiritual infrastructure. The real claims to power, the real massive amounts of power that some of these people claim are not within the remit of what we know as politics. They're within the remit of spirituality. And I've said many times before, our own monarchy in the UK, the British Royals, and the British political system is all part of that same tree. Parliament claims its authority from the people under the governance of the royalty, the Queen at the moment, and the Queen claims her authority from the Vatican, and the Vatican says it gets its authority straight from the big guy. It's all part of a tree of progression, and who's the biggest dog on that tree? You keep following the chain and looking at what it is that they're doing and asking the questions of, well, what is their intention with some of the stuff that they're doing, the kind of things that they're perpetuating or enabling or enacting, bringing new stuff into being. Why are they doing that? Where are they trying to take us? That's just one part of that kind of process, questioning process. You can get into the kind of divinity or theist or atheist kind of stuff as well, but that still comes back to are you choosing to utilize your own responsibility and authority for yourself, or are you abdicating it to somebody else? It's easy enough to say, oh yeah, I believe in a God, mate. And it's like, well, are you going to do anything? Are you going to help about some of these problems that are happening in the world? Like people's parents, elderly parents being deliberately killed off so that the state can steal their estate. Are you going to help with that? Or are you just going to turn around and go, oh no, God decides that kind of stuff, mate. I can't do anything about it. It's in God's hands, nothing I can do. Abdication of authority and responsibility. As I said earlier, the vast majority of this comes back to us and our participation in this stuff, in these systems and infrastructures and claims to authority. That doesn't mean you yourself are personally at fault or are a bad person or are, the evil one causing all this shit to happen. But your continued participation in the illusion just helps to perpetuate the illusion. If everybody in the audience believes the magician's trick, somebody coming into the audience and sitting down and watching the trick and thinking, that's bullshit, I can see what he's doing there. But everybody else in the audience is going, way, yeah, brilliant, magician, way. That one individual is going to be sat there thinking, am I wrong? There is a psychological experiment based on that question, the conformity test, the Asch conformity test. It's just one example of how we as beings are very much social beings, or we have an element of our experience of reality that relies on interaction with others, and we value those interactions to such a degree that if 99% of the people around us tell us the sky is green, we will question and doubt ourselves when we look up at the sky and see blue. Because we're not individual singularity islands in a vacuum existence. We're in a symbiotic existence between the self and the collective. And in that exchange, we value our own existence and we put values on our experience of existence based on those interactions. So as long as people keep repeating the illusion, the delusions, this stuff is going to perpetuate, and the machine is going to grind its way towards efficiency until the tension in that spring has to be released, and then the release of that tension will be catastrophic. It will be violent. It will be destructive, because that's the method this system has learned to perpetuate itself. Build to an extreme and then release tension, build to extreme, release tension. And they do it again and again and again through that Phoenix Gate effect. I think I've ranted enough about that. Going round in a circle. So if I've gone round in enough circles to talk about going round in a circle. How many circles make up a circle? Is it 360? Or would that be a sphere or an oblate spheroid? Yeah, never know. I shouldn't say things like I'll get myself in on the naughty step again. And I did say, sorry, doing the classic, I did say I'd come back to the chat room and say hello. And then I didn't. No, I said hello to lots of chat room. Hello. Dino, hello, Dino. Sounds like a song. Hello, Dino. And Sui Generous, hello. Sui Generous. I think I'm pronouncing it right, Sui Generous, as far as I remember. And Super Leeds, hello. Thanks for letting me know, mate. Otherwise, I would have been ranting mistakenly for longer. And Krishna, hello. How do you do? I'm sure you've been doing your Hangouts nearly every day, haven't you? So if people are looking for an open Hangout where you can join in and have a conversation with others, please go and check out Krishna's channel. He's regularly hosting Hangouts for people if you want to join in and have a chat with others, and talking about anything and everything. As far as I know, they talk about whatever you want to talk about. I shouldn't presume though. Go and check out and ask. Ask for yourself. Authentic Human Programming, hello. Yeah, happy Moon Days. Moon Days, always a happy day on reflection. And Huxley Pig, hello. Hope you're doing all right and doing better than me, losing my voice already. I'm scrolling down. And let's go in. I'm not seeing any other names in the chat, as I thought it might be. It's a bit quiet tonight by the looks of it. Now that we have less ability to share around the links, they're moving around a lot less. Roberto Carlos, hello, mate. The folks who pull the levers are the followers, not the leaders. All it takes is a few believers. Yeah, definitely true, mate. And Dottie's in the chat as well. Hello, Tony. Yeah, I've finished ranting. If you want to unmute, guys, if you can think of anything to say, or we're just repeating ourselves again.
Michael Jackson's a paedophile. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's another. We come back to that again after how long's it been since that court case?
2005. Yeah.
So more than a decade. Yeah, bloody hell.
And he died 4 years later, didn't he? Allegedly some overdose of anesthetic. I think now looking at that documentary, I think he killed himself.
Yeah, you mentioned that before we started, and I wondered, like, do you mean he'd already been taking something else as well as then what the doctor gave him?
I think he was taking all sorts anyway. And eventually your body doesn't handle it very well over time anyway. But I think, maybe that particular time, he was 50 years old. Remember, it was 10 years ago. It's the 10th anniversary, funny enough, this documentary's come around. But I do urge people to go and watch that for 3 hours and spend 3 hours watching it and see what you think. And the reaction to it has been, what I've seen anyway, is that yes, definitely people have had their what's called the spell of Hollywood or entertainment has been cast upon people, and really and truly it's been they've done a number on us, really, I think. And he was abused, as we know anyway, so that the abusers, the abused can become the abuser. That's a pattern that follows, and especially with this sexual abuse in children and that. And I'd advise you, I'd urge you to go and listen to Pockets of the Future, who did work in this field, working with abuse victims and things like of sexual abuse and of this nature. So this coming out, people say, oh, why did it take them so long to talk about this? And we all know 2005 he was found not guilty and whatever, but when you look back and you see what actually is been happening and how they put this thing together, I don't think it's a hit piece or anything like that. I think this guy was because he was abused himself and everything else. I think his father actually probably sold him into a paedophile ring in Hollywood when he was probably about 6 years old. And that's where it started with him. So and then it just led on. Yeah, go on.
they did admit that his dad was physically and psychologically abusive, didn't they? So
Yes, yes, yeah.
yeah, it's only one other thing to sort of add to the charge sheet, and if he was involved with that kind of Hollywood cult element, just saying cult it's not really very accurate descriptor. It's far more than that. It's institutionalized.
Yeah.
It does become somewhat of almost like a given, an obvious given that, well, if he was abusing him in those other ways, he'd probably been sexually abused as well.
Yeah, yeah, and the stories of the brothers saying that actually in interviews in the past. I think his brother Jermaine was saying that, where one time he was they were on tour, and at that time he was probably 6 or 7 years old. That's the time that, funnily enough, he started grooming his his boys later on. And he was taken off by his father one evening. Actually, they'd finished, and they didn't know where he was going with Michael. Yeah, they took him off, and then they saw him later on the next day, looking slightly, a bit different. And his brothers were thinking they didn't think anything wrong of it, but they thought it was unusual for him to just be taken away like that and not seen again until the very, later on the next day. And his behaviour was a little bit, they said, a bit different for a while. But this is all probably when this starts. But with the kids being, when he was on tour and things like that, or when they sort of, just like I say, watch the documentary, and if you haven't seen it, it's a 3-hour documentary. It's in 2 parts, but watch both parts. Don't just watch the first half an hour and then start ranting and raving and going, yeah, and making judgments. Watch the whole thing and see what you think. But definitely, yeah, you see how the mind's affected by that abuse, and how these victims, have come to, finally speak out, in that sense. So I think, it's always been known. I mean, Neverland and Peter Pan and the Pan and all the rest of it. It's all linked. I mean, it's very dark stuff, when they do these things to children. Just goes to how sick and evil Hollywood is. I mean, what's that song, Burn, Hollywood Burn, by Left Field? It just comes to mind. It's an awful, sick place. And it's been at it since its creation, in that sense, to cast a spell on the masses and then come out with this horrific stuff years later. They've done it with lots of people over time. We've seen it since the Savile stuff and everything else. But, all these, more recent ones, R. Kelly and others, that people again have known about for decades and decades. And just seems that people are now asking the question as well, actually, it isn't historical. What's going on now? We know that industry stinks to hell. We know it's full of it's rife with this sort of behavior, pedophiles running amok. So what, and that's the question people are asking now, I think. And that's good, because people aren't just taking it as a historical stuff. Go on, Gary.
I noticed one thing you said about watching that video. You said how the kids, when they were young, they were hypnotized by Michael Jackson. They didn't mind the abuse.
They were in love with him. They loved him. He was like a superhero,
Of course. So over the course of the film, they kind of tell you how they came out of that hypnosis. Is that useful, you think? Interesting?
Yeah, well, I think it is interesting, because, I mean, imagine the story he tells. He has to sit in front of that camera and say the things he says, and it's like, wow. Like I say, just you've got to watch this yourself. And, to me, it was just confirmation of things because I thought the court case was dodgy when that verdict was not guilty in 2005, because there was, it was because he had other people like Macaulay Culkin, who he also was, very close to when he was a young boy. You see all that evidence and stuff. You can see those pictures online or whatever. So this guy spent, most of the time grooming boys from the ages of 7 to 14. That was the sort of ages he would sort of groom them on the 7-year period, and he'd do it with various ones. And the families were also under a grooming effect as well. And again, it's this spell of Hollywood, like I say, it's the spell. And my kid is super dancer, so he goes into a Michael Jackson competition to dance like Michael Jackson, and he wins it, and he gets to meet Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson really likes him. It's almost like, it's setting up competitions to get kids in. It's just sick. But this is the realization. We have to get beyond this program, and we've all gone under, in a sense, of the music business and how they present these actors and stars and whatever they are, whatever field they're from, and they've done a number on us and it's coming out, and at least people are aware of, the fact that this is a bigger thing. And there's more questions being asked now about what's going on right now rather than what went on years ago. But you can see how the whole thing is played out, and the damage it does to the people that it happens to, the kids. I mean, 7 years old, you know, the stories this guy's telling, and both, you know, they're not together sitting there being interviewed. You know, there's two, you know, these kids have a history, because I remember it in the news. I remember the little kid in the Pepsi Cola advert. I remember him, you know, I remember the dancing stuff, you know, you'd always see him holding hands and this type of thing, but because it was the 80s, it was the 90s, you know, it was all that, and it just didn't, it, you know, like I say, having sleepovers with kids when you're 34 years old is just not right, and having a fun fair in your back garden just isn't right, you know. It's just, there's many red flags. Well, like Savile, you know, same thing. People chose to ignore it, didn't want to talk about it. If you look at the Hollywood industry as well, you know, with all the other ones, they're all protecting each other to a certain degree. They all know what they're like. They all sort of look out for each other in that sense. And, you know, like I say, with Michael Jackson in particular, because he was so abused, he was the, you know, people have said he's the first sort of, if you call, original superstar, if you like, to go under that MK Ultra, that demonic programming, all that abuse stuff to rebuild his personality and whatever. And he just walks around like a 9-year-old child in the head, but really and truly he's in a man's body now, and he becomes the abuser. And that's the MO that Pockets of Future talks about on his chat about it. So, you know, it's just, again, we're just naive, or, you know, we just, again, we're sold the image, the media and everything else. And, you know,
people defend their heroes.
Yes, of course they do. They don't want to believe that, you know.
If you've been convinced somebody's a hero, then you will normally, most people anyway, you'll defend them. Certainly in the beginning, when the initial sort of attack begins, I remember people defending Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
When that first started to come out, you know, you remember the various celebrities that popped up on TV speaking about, oh, he was such a great guy, he did so much for charity. And they all rapidly disappeared out of view, you know, once more evidence started coming out. But I think it's a natural reaction for people. I noticed Jason posting in the chat, so I sent you an invite, Jason, if you want to join in, you're welcome to. But that, the other element I wanted to mention is that Hollywood element. You know, we've talked about it many times in the past, and that creation of the illusion. You know, could talk at length about the connections between Hollywood, and the use of the holly, because it was a winter fruit, you know, winter budding and all that kind of, all the magic connections and blah, blah, blah. But when it comes down to it, really, it's about crafting an illusion and then convincing the public to believe in that illusion. And that's connected into even just the etymology of the word entertainment. I mentioned this on Jeff's show on Friday. You know, you start looking at that word and start pulling it apart and its connections and whatever. It's the same as saying hypnotizing someone.
Yeah.
Because that's what the roots of the word structure mean. You enter into a place in the mind where you're held there in the mind. You enter, pretty obvious, you're going into something. Tain is a part of words similar to attain and contain. And it basically means to hold something, or to, you know, to keep it in place.
Yeah.
So you entertainment. You are putting, you know, you're getting a part of the mind and holding it in place, or you're putting something into the mind and getting the mind to hold it there. You know, so I believe in the magician's trick. That's that entertainment. You are entering an illusion and choosing to hold it in your mind.
Fascinate.
Yes, fascinate.
Yeah. But it's good that you know, people are seeing this now, and people don't want to, you know, like I say, they're the fans of Michael Jackson's music and everything else. You know, we were saying off air, you know, people would like him sort of when he was 6 years old music, but anything when he's a bit older is not being played or whatever. But
there's an element of absolutism as well with a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, I know, and this is true of so many different stars and performers and whatever, musicians and whatever. There's loads of people, loads of groups that you can find out information about, such that it makes it pretty obvious, if not outright proves, that they have nefarious agendas, or they're doing things without being honest and upfront with their audience. So they're using subtle sort of psychological trickery, or even outright magic. You know, they're trying to do sorcery and shit like that. But for me, when it comes down to it, it's like, well, if you're aware of that, it's the same as seeing the magician's trick. you can see through it. That doesn't mean you have to pursue it to destruction. Yeah, in that kind of absolutist sense of like, oh, well, if Michael Jackson now is proven to be a pedo, then his entire back catalogue of music should be burnt on a pyre, and we should never ever mention his name again. All his name shall be struck from the annals of history. You know, that absolutism is engendered by the system. They'll happily build up a hero for you and then crash them down because of the psychological trauma effects it has on you of having your heroes destroyed in that fashion.
Yeah.
It makes you psychologically apathetic and weak. It's a learned helplessness response, a victim response when your hero is, turns out to be a villain.
Yeah.
So that kind of element to me is like, well, I can't say I ever really liked all of Michael Jackson's stuff because I didn't. It was too pop music-y for me. I wasn't really into pop music for a lot of my life. So some of it I like, and some of it I can appreciate just on a purely sort of kind of musical sense of, well, if you like pop music, the guy was fucking good at doing pop music. Yeah, so if you're into that kind of stuff, he was great for that. But to me, it's why deny yourself any learning, any pleasure, any benefit simply because the guy now turns out to be a villain? I felt the same about a lot of artists in recent years who've turned out they've been outed in one way or another. And it turns out that there's some kind of whatever, a Satan worshipper or something. It's like, well, I can still listen to their music and enjoy it and appreciate it. And I know I'm not a Satanist, so just listening to the music doesn't automatically turn you into a Satanist. So you want me to, I'm not saying you, but this is a lot of the attitude that gets pumped out there, yeah? You want me to take on this absolutist attitude of like, well, if I even hear one chorus line of Sergeant Pepper's, that means I'm going to be believing Aleister Crowley was God. Oh, no, fuck you, you weak-minded twat.
But I think the pedo element's strong, though, isn't it? That's the most abhorrent thing, isn't it? I mean,
making people aware of that's how the Hollywood industry works, and it's not just Hollywood. Hollywood is like the name, the brand label that everybody talks about, but it's that media entertainment industry utilizes pedophilia in the same way as so many other institutionalized parts of the infrastructure do the same thing.
Maybe the lid's coming off all of it.
Yeah, and making people aware of that, especially parents who are tempted or inclined to like, my kid's so good at dancing or so good at singing, I'm going to help them be a star. And they literally push them into those institutions. That's like, you're feeding the beast when you do that kind of shit. Yeah? You're offering it sacrifices, such as like, his dad, Jackson's dad.
Yeah.
He obviously willingly knew what was going to happen to his children, but he forcibly pushed them into it.
Yeah.
Who's the worst abuser in that case? The paedophile who comes along and takes advantage of that chance to exploit a child, or the person who made the whole thing possible in the first place?
Well, as I said, narcissistic ego parents, they exist, who and they exist the same. It seems that's what a lot of them want for their children, these types of characters. But again, they have to look at themselves, and it's the focus on the family and the well-being of the child, paramount number one. But it seems that stardom, the spell of Hollywood and entertainment, if you've got a talented child, that just gets all washed away, and you hand them over to a bunch of pedos in Disney or Hollywood or wherever. We see all these kids come through over the last 20, 30 years, some of them have been okay, some of them have been completely fucked up, some of them are dead. So it's a mess. So maybe that's the question, that's the thing people are asking. It's going on now. It just wasn't going on then, it's going on now too. So what they're going to do, we're not going to make any more movies. The artist's not going to record any more music. Is it that's the politicians as well? We haven't mentioned them. The list is long. of historical politicians who are paedophiles. So, you know, it's you know, this is, I think the realization, it's not pretty, it's not nice to know, it's not like you say, it's something that, you know, if you've put that, again, another lesson for people: don't follow gurus. Don't, you may like the music, but the people who do that, they're just human beings like you. They may, yeah, they've got a bit of a talent, they can sing, they can play an instrument, or they have a great songwriting ability or something, but they're just humans too. And that's the problem. We guru follow still, and that's the reaction of this Michael Jackson thing.
Well, a lot of pop stars, you know. I mean, I remember when I first went out to Greece, I was picking oranges. Well, on a day off, you know, sort of almost everybody had a book in their bag, and somebody come up with a Crowley book, and somebody else immediately said, "Oh yeah, I want to read that." And you know, it's the same in the pop industry. You know, people have got long journeys to take, and when you're in that industry, you've got people who are already in it giving out the Crowley books to get people in, you know, to get people interested.
Yeah.
Yeah. And on an interesting note on this as well was what I was talking about Thomas Sheridan earlier on. His YouTube channel is all sort of political comment and a little bit about this and a little bit about that. And he kind of touches on the magic. You go onto his Facebook, which is covered, you see, because YouTube's open, right? But the Facebook page is a lot more enclosed. That's where he gets people, and he literally pretends to practice magic. Like if people are trolling him, yeah, he'll make a little clay biscuit, yeah, with a little evil face and the person's name on the other side, right? And he'll put it on his windowsill to hex people that are trying to troll him. Yeah, but he won't tell you what the names are. You know, it's all mystery. It's all creating mystery in a little closed group of people. Yeah,
creating an illusion.
Yeah, the same methods, creating an illusion. Yeah.
When you were telling me about it earlier, because I'd seen, I haven't watched much of his stuff recently, but I've seen the titles of the videos coming up that he's uploading. Because I've never looked at his YouTube, his Facebook page. I've never followed him on Facebook because I don't do Facebook. I've only ever seen the YouTube output. And that's why for years I've recommended him to people, because of some of the stuff that he talks about on the YouTube channel. But I've never seen any of the other stuff. But when you were telling me about it, it made sense. It made connection for me, because I've seen him and heard him mention things and say things. It's like, well, are you just deliberately trying to mess with your audience? It's almost as if you're trying to experiment on them in some way. Like you want to go, like, yeah, I'll throw in this little controversy here and we'll see how the crowd reacts, and we'll study them like ants as they run around doing it. You know, I've seen him do shit like that. But now you're explaining the stuff about the Facebook and everything. I was like, yeah, I could see what you mean. Yeah, I would be very much less inclined to recommend him to people now, and less I'm pointing them to particular videos that he's done about certain subjects. Yeah, but again, like we've been saying with other stuff, the guru element. I mean, the image you got up of the new Marvel superhero character, yeah, it's the same thing. They're creating a new hero for a certain demographic of the public to invest their belief into. And then she'll probably turn out to be something bad in the future.
Yeah, no, she's because they fucked it up with the last film, killing off half the people. And the new one is already planned. And I just took a look at it, and she's in the new one. So she gets her own film to get everybody interested in the Marvel stuff again. And now they can bring out, you know, clearing up the mess after Thanos. And she's going to be in that one, yeah? So, you know, people might forget that Spider-Man actually died in the last one, but it looks like he's in it again.
Oh, like I said at the time, they'll fix it. They're not going to leave that. That's not the end of the story. They'll fix it, and their heroes will win.
Have you seen the film? She's got these magic hands, yeah, where she can throw thunderbolts with her hands and stuff. You know,
the new one, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, I do not think it was an LGBT agenda. I think it was an immigrant agenda that was being pushed, because of these ugly green aliens. Oh, we hate them because they're ugly, and they turn out to be the good guys.
I also got the impression that they might have been meant to represent the tribe, especially when, you know, the motto of the Mossad, by deception thou shalt do war.
Yeah, and we have no home. We have no home.
Exactly.
We are home. Yeah.
And, I mean, she's got an 8-pointed star on her chest, but The thing to me, I see what you're saying about the immigrants, yeah, but I felt inclined that it was more trying to sort of put across the argument about the tribe needing a home. Yeah. But, they're really pumping the hero worship now.
I'll leave that one up. Yeah.
But I mean, like, I ain't going to mention him by name, but the one who's supposedly being arrested again now. Same with him. They're pumping him up to be a hero for a certain demographic of the UK public in particular. But he is pretty much he's a global name now, thanks to some of the connections that have spread knowledge of him all over the place. I'm talking about Yaxley Lennon, just in case people.
Oh, him, yeah. Oh, right, yes.
Yeah, but he's been presented as a hero, and same thing. They're pumping up that kind of element, the illusionary element of making people believe in him as if he's going to be their new superhero.
Well, he was in Palestine, wasn't he? I saw a clip pop up.
He's been there before, yeah.
Yeah, walking through sort of, I don't know what it was, but yeah, it was a short clip. So he's out there in that part of the world. But yeah, he wasn't very, put it this way, sympathetic towards the Palestinians in that way. To the children he was, but then he was taking the Israeli stance of they give all the money to get the bombs and fund the war against us, and all the rest of it. So yeah, but that probably happens too. But that does happen. But then again, it's a genocide out there, as we know, and it's a hell of a mess. But him being out there, I'll tell you what I did notice. He put on a pile of weight. I thought he's eating well. He's been looked after, isn't he? Out to fancy restaurants probably, and taken out here and everywhere. Who knows?
I'll put a link in for this video, yeah, into the chat. Yeah, this is a Unite Planet. These guys were on your show a little while back. You remember, Jason? Yeah, Unite Planet, and he's done a really good expose of Tommy Robinson, saying, watch the Panodrama thing. Yeah, which most of it revolves around this little bit here, where he's with the guy who was going to produce the program. And he'd gotten a girl in there to act as a journalist and get the guy to say on camera, yeah, this is all about Tommy Robinson. We're going to drag him down. We're going to make him look like dirt. And we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And she got it all on record. And then Tommy comes up and confronts the guy. I think people above knew that it was going to happen, but they didn't tell him. They didn't tell the BBC guy. And he's going to go to his producer after and say, hey, well, how the fuck did you let that happen? So don't worry, our orders from above. Look, here's 10,000 expense account. Take a couple of weeks in the sun. That's how they'll do it, yeah? Because it was all stage managed. Because like they say, yeah, how the hell do you get outside the Salford BBC channel and set up a bloody cinema screen with speakers and fucking microphones and a stage, and the police don't come along and say, oh, you can't do that here. I mean, how do you do that unless it's being orchestrated?
Yeah.
I haven't watched any of it. I don't look at any of the stuff to do with him unless it's other people talking about shit he's done.
These guys are worth watching because they've got film of the guy going around somewhere. I don't know where he's saying, I can score drugs anywhere. And he goes into this town. He says, oh, you're a taxi driver. Take me to the most violent pub in this city. And he goes into the most violent pub in the city and straight away buys dope. And they've got him ranting about Palestinians. I'd kill Palestinians. I'd be with the fucking idea, killing Palestinians. And he looks at the camera and he says, why not? I thought, fucking hell, narcissism or whatever. Yeah? But they've got some good clips on that.
But that's part of the illusion game. They need him to seem like he's being victimized or embattled. The dark forces are out to get him and try and shut him down or something. And that gives him an element of kudos then. And especially at the moment with the way the system is outright cracking down on free speech. There's a part of this that I wanted to, I might come back to in another episode because it might end up going on for a bit, but it's similar to stuff I was talking about recently, where it's based on that kind of psychological manipulation of you make people want to fight for something, even though there's something they're fighting for is a corrupted version of what you told them it was. So like the kind of idea of free speech being you must listen, that element that a lot of people have, where it's sort of like it's far more than free speech. What they're asking for, what they're demanding, is that you are forced to listen to what they have to say. Now, in that respect, that kind of attitude is beneficial to the system, because the system can use that to convince you that, well, you have to receive the system propaganda. You have to hear what the BBC says, because the BBC has the right to free speech, and free speech means you have to listen, right? Do you see what I mean? Yeah, they're subtly getting people to fight for something that is not in the long run in their benefit, and also is not really what they think is meant by the definition free speech. So doing the same kind of thing with that kind of situation around Yaxley Lennon, they're getting people to support him because they think his free speech is being shut down, which I know it is in many ways, yeah, but it's not truly being shut down, because here we are talking about him and his stuff now. Yeah, so the information about him and the information about the stuff he talks about is still moving around. It's still out there.
Well, there's no such thing as bad publicity, is there, in that sense?
No,
for him,
But I mean, in the sense of them corrupting the meaning of free speech, such that now people are supporting him and fighting for free speech, or what they think is meant by free speech, and what they're actually doing is reinforcing a goal that serves the system, because the system can then turn around to you and say, well, if you've got free speech, so have we, so you have to listen to what we say to you, because that's the meaning of free speech that they've convinced people about. Yeah, to me, if somebody's got the ability to speak or to put their point of view, their information out there publicly in one way or another, then that means they have free speech. Yeah, if you're able to go to a meeting somewhere and speak with other people, that's free speech. If you can have something on the internet, whether it be a YouTube channel or a Twitter page or whatever other platform you use, where you can do your thing and say what you want to say, that's free speech. But when it comes to this idea that, well, you've got to allow me to come into your environment and say this stuff to you directly, that's not free speech. That's you claiming the right to impose yourself upon me. Yeah. To me, the situation around him seems to be geared towards that, the use of that narrative to manipulate people into supporting him. I know it's kind of like a long way round of saying they're using victim mentality to build him a support base, yeah, by making it seem that he's been victimized and he's been shut down and having his free speech removed. That makes more people inclined to want to support him, because they feel they're in the same position, because the system is actively shutting down a lot of people's free speech. So they may have personal experience of it happening to them, like I mentioned earlier. They might have been blocked on Facebook or some shit. So then they're more inclined to go, oh, yeah, he says he's championing free speech and he's been shut down because he's talking about the immigrants and stuff like that. So I'll support him. There's a lot of fucking manipulation and illusion going on with this shit, man. Such that, I know I'm going round in little circles, but it brings me back to saying the same thing that we've mentioned, the guru worship, the hero, the false hero being created for you, and then you invest in your emotion and energy into them, and then they turn out to be a bad guys in some fashion. This is about us, ourselves, not these fucking heroes that turn up all over the place again and again and again to champion for some fucking cause.
Yeah. But we get sucked into, like I say, the guru thing is something, I think, because you look up to someone who's got a talent or can do something you can't do, or you've tried to do and you're crap at it or whatever, and you look at this individual or this whatever, and you put them on the platform, on the pedestal straight away. And it's just that, well, okay, it's a kind of like they know we do that, and they've harness that sort of energy with the people that have, you know, managed to reach the big stages, you know, the big, you know, the Hollywood stage, you know, the big, you know, entertainment world, the ones who we like or make us laugh and giggle and whatever, and we think they're cool, or they produce good music and
much better dancer than me.
yeah, all the, you know, all that.
Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's just, again, it's the way it's been, like I say, this it's been going on for decades and decades and decades. So as I say, it hasn't stopped. It's just they're doing it in whatever ways they're doing it now. And all the stuff we've seen come out, like you know, the Pizzagate stuff as well, you know, a few years ago. And then back the Savile stuff, which came out in 2012. Yeah.
Do you think that a lot of this stuff, though, could be part of that destabilizing tactic? We sort of mentioned it a while ago, talking about the Yuri Bezmenov kind of stuff.
I was going to say, and demoralization, you know, demoralizing people. You know, they've had their heroes, the person you thought is turned out to be a
degenerate.
Yeah, he's a wrong un. You know, you wouldn't let your kid fucking 100 yards of him. You know, he's wrong. He should have been locked up back in the day, but he wasn't. He paid him off back in the day, and then the court case, he got off, and then they released all the white doves. Do you remember? And all that bullshit. You know, and you know, but no, he got away with it, and you know, he carried on. And
he got away with it.
Hello, Jason.
He did, didn't he? He didn't go to jail, did he?
Well, look, he didn't go to jail. He was tried by his peers, and he was released. All right, he was found not guilty by a jury of his peers. None of us know what went on in the courtroom. Nobody knows the reasons why, but he was found not guilty. So, I mean, this thing, it's so obvious. This new documentary, it's so obvious. You've got two accusers who were successful and are now falling on hard times, right? and what they're doing. I watched the documentary twice. I watched the first one, and then the following night I watched it with my wife. Then I watched the second one, and the following night I watched it with my wife again. So I watched them both, and I could see that both of those were lying. Now, I'm not a Michael Jackson fan. I'm not a Michael Jackson sympathizer. All I want to know is what's real. That's all that matters to me, is what's real. And they weren't real. They were padding out the stories. You've got families who are, and this is the reason why the fact you've got, how much money would it take for you to admit on camera that you'd left your 7-year-old child with somebody who was a male on his own, in a like a magical world, and left him? How much would it cost you? How much would it take for you to be able to admit that? Because nobody is doing that. No parent is doing that. I promise you, no parent's doing that. They're just not. So what they've been told to do is they've been paid money to admit to things that they've not done, things that nobody would do. Really, I mean, come on, why is nobody saying anything? These blokes were the telling thing about it for me. If you look at them, there was very little emotion. We're talking about some, and whether you're talking about the emotion was love because they loved Michael Jackson, or the emotion was that they felt pain from the abuse that they claimed to endure. There wasn't any emotion. And the one thing that was missing for me and was very telling, because you got, don't forget, in the second part, they both got wives. So we're talking about two heterosexual blokes, or blokes that are living a heterosexual life. The one thing that they never said is he penetrated them up, up the backside. He never anally penetrated them. One of them said that he tried to near the end, but but he said it before he even got in, it hurt. So what they're doing then is they're distancing themselves because they are heterosexual. They're distancing themselves. They're not prepared to go. So that's why I believe that the evidence that they were giving, the testimony they were saying, I believe it was lies. Now that doesn't mean to say that I think that Michael Jackson was innocent of everything. That I'm just basing it upon what my observations on those two particular interviews that were given. And if you do watch it, you can see there's a lot of stuff there's a lot of padding. When people are lying, they have padding. They add padding. It's like, we went on this thing and we did this and we did that and we did that. And then it'd take a long time to get to the point where they were talking about the actual abuse. And then the abuse part would be brief. The part when they were talking about the abuse would be brief, and it would be repetitive. Now, also the lack of physical evidence. There's no physical evidence at all in this, none whatsoever. I mean, that worries me. And also, we're talking about these lads this is supposed to be happening in the 90s. Now, we know that Jackson was accused in the 90s, and Geordie Chandler, I think his name were, and he paid it off. And I think his excuse was that he paid it off because it was going to cost more money to defend it. But then we're talking about in 2005, when the allegations were made, these two people that have made these accusations went into court as adults and defended Michael Jackson and said that nothing had happened. So they're adults at this time. They're 20. I think one of them were 21. I don't know how old the other one was, but they were both adults, and they defended Michael Jackson. So they're at the point where but what you've got to remember is at that time, one of them was I think the choreographer for NSYNC, and the other one was doing all other stuff. So they were successful at that time. So they didn't need money. They didn't need to sell the story. Now they're both falling on hard times. Now for me, for the people that have made this film, it's like a really, really easy set. It's an easy sell. Michael Jackson was a paedophile. Let's just get two people. Let's get a couple of people to, say we can tell these stories. We can embellish it. But what you can't do is you can't. The body language and the things that they won't say. They won't say, I got bummed. They won't say, they penetrated me anally. They won't say that because they're heterosexual and they want to keep the reputation, and they know that this is just an act anyway. That's what that is, and that's what I took from that, and that's why I when I don't know if Michael Jackson was a pedophile. I really don't know, and to be fair, what good is knowing now? And we're talking about 10 years after his death. Look at timing as well. 10 years after his death. It's all for just to make the book. And whether, it even could be because his record sales have gone through roof since this happened. It could even be on their part. They might be doing it. Is this stay? Somebody to do with his family or something? I don't know. But I'll tell you now, those blokes on there were lying.
Do you think it could have something to do with Sony?
Well, yeah. I mean,
they still don't own the whole catalogue, do they? So they might be deliberately trying to trash him, hoping to reduce the value a bit so that they can buy it out or some shit like that.
But I think it's a deep, dark world. I really do. And I think the way that these guys, operate, the MO that they do, the grooming and that abuse thing. I mean, yeah, how deep does that go in somebody? How does that fuck someone up? What does that do? I don't know. There's a lot of people who have been abused. It fucks their lives up. It's, it's a mess. Like you say, he groomed them from the ages of, was it 7 to 14, and then left it. And then obviously he just liked young boys, obviously, and over 14 was far too old. So that was the sort of age he got them at. But then that world they create, that grooming process, it's, yeah. I mean, like I say, I don't know. We just see it from the documentary element. Like you say, there's a lot of filler in that. And like you say, it's very direct in the actual descriptions of the abuse, but it's very short. But at the same time, you know, I think Hollywood and what we see come out of that over the years, these rings exist, these paedophile types exist, and I just think again, it's just the, you know, it's a shame, you know, that they, like I say, bring out the 10th anniversary. People had a sort of a good idea anyway. They make up their own minds, but when you listen to people who've had abuse or had sexual abuse of that sort of nature, and people who've dealt with it, and have to deal with it throughout, you know, their lives as they go older, you know, it's
But
it fucks
what you
people,
do there,
fucks them
what
up,
you do
basically.
there is you're bringing emotion into something when the emotion might not be applicable to the people that have given evidence in this. Yes, well,
Yeah,
obviously,
but
everybody that's been the victim of abuse.
it's a very emotive subject, Jason, isn't it? Really, paedophilia. It's very emotive. You know, sexual abuse against any child is disgusting and horrible. And when you're dealing with that subject and you're talking about people who potentially look like they were or are or could be, then you know, it stirs a lot of emotions in people. So I understand, you know, from, you know, people getting, you know, upset about things. So yeah, I get that.
It is that particular celebrity effect
Yeah.
as well, because the reality of that stuff going on, I feel, is undeniable. There's more than enough direct evidence that it occurs. You know, beside the celebrities that get pointed out, you know, and paraded in this kind of fashion, you know, like big controversy and whatever. But that's like I was going to say the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. Yeah, that's a bit of cheesy irony or ironic connection, but his case is a tip of the iceberg effect. The reality that there is institutionalized paedophilia going on in that entertainment industry is undeniable, because there is a plethora of proven cases piled up to show it. So I can see what you're saying, Jay. It looks like they are deliberately trying to play this up because of you know, they're going to get money out of this. You know, that's what it comes down to. They'll generate some big revenue out of all this shit. And now that he's dead, they don't give a fuck about what happens to him, do they? Because he's dead. So if the purpose of generating money is all that matters, it doesn't matter if they shit all over his reputation, does it? You know, they're still getting what they want in the long run. But for me, it's that way that this occupies people, because it's a celebrity, because it's that hero element. And it's sort of like, hang on a minute, he's just that celebrity tip of the iceberg, revealing of this stuff. You know, it's thousands and thousands of other people that this shit happens to that don't get a mention in the news.
Yeah.
Well, we can't really talk about, like, we can't. This is because this is what we're given to talk about. We can't really talk about creepy Jeff up road, who we think is, you know, ogling young girls as they're going past up the way to school, because we don't know about it. Because this celebrity thing seems to, well, it seems it's forced upon us.
But do you think though that is? I asked Peter. They're doing it deliberately because of that kind of destabilizing effect.
Yeah.
They reveal it, like the what's his name, Wienerstein. You know, all the stuff to do with him. You know, it's like they're deliberately outing a lot of these people, either living or dead, as part of a way of destabilizing people psychologically, destabilizing the general populace. Yeah.
Yeah.
But stick about Harvey Weinstein. I mean, do you think Harvey Weinstein tonight is, you know, at a soup kitchen?
No.
It's not, is it? It doesn't really matter. You know, it comes into people's consciousness, and then it drifts away. And like now we just associate the name Weinstein with, I don't know. Well, I'll tell you what we don't associate with Jewish pedophile rings, do we?
I was going to say, Jason, Epstein, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, him or whatever his name is, the other one who seems to pop in and out of the news, getting away with it and paying off deals and whatever, you know. So they still, like I say, they don't give a shit. It's almost like the system doesn't mind, like it didn't, you know.
Because it serves the purpose of the system. It's a major intrinsic part of how the system works. And that for me is what I keep trying to get across to people. You know, it's I know it's, as you say, genuinely, it's an emotive subject, so it's perfectly understandable why people get so reactive about it. Yeah, because you should be, you know, emotionally responding in that way. That means you're emotionally healthy. that you see that this thing is bad and whatever. But
Mm.
the reality of it is the system relies on this stuff happening. So if you keep falling into this naive kind of mentality of like, oh, I never thought he'd be one, or I never thought that that was real, you know, oh, I don't believe any of it's real, because they would never do that to us, would they? You know, all that kind of stuff is just perpetuating this shit. The system will not stop using paedophilia as part of the way it does its thing. It relies on it to control people. So the only way you're going to deal with it is not by like dragging these celebrities through court and, you know, doing like what's happening at the moment with Michael Jackson and what. That ain't going to solve the problem.
No.
It's about dealing with the system itself, because this system relies on using that stuff, that kind of manipulation and abuse. So therefore we need to deal with what this system is, whether that means changing the structure of it or just scrapping it completely and putting something else in, whatever. I don't know. You know, I can't say I've got an answer in that respect, but it's a unrealistic expectation to think that the system is going to stop doing this, because it's not. It's been there all along.
Yeah,
This is not a new subject. It's a subject that's been there all along.
I was going to say, you saw that hysteria in the 60s with the Beatles and all that, kids crying and girls collapsing, and that sort of that sort of pop star work.
The beginning of MK Ultra kind of manipulation through media.
Yeah, you know, sort of airports being mobbed and all that. Remember that was all black and white footages of them, all, you know, thousands of them at bloody wherever. So yeah,
taking the psychological manipulation techniques that they'd learned to do with individuals, and by using the new transmission media, they could now do it to people en masse.
Yeah.
So they started perfecting or mastering the technique through group, like the effect that happened around the Beatles. You know, I think that's why they had such an obvious interaction with people like Crowley. That's probably the most revealing time of how they began building the structure of what it is now. I could reference things as well, like Orson Welles doing the War of the Worlds thing, which utilized radio, and they learned a lot from that of how they could manipulate people en masse. But radio was limited compared to television and movies. So they concentrated on television and movies, and hence the rise of that kind of Beatles effect, Beatlemania effect. They're still doing it now. And like you said, Jason, it's like this is what they present us to talk about. Yeah. And that's part of the reason why I didn't watch the documentary when I saw it come up. Because I thought, I just can't be asked. There's other things I want to listen to or watch. You know, this is like, I'm sure this is going to play out in the media as it has been doing.
Yeah.
And I was more interested in the people's reaction to that media. So rather than looking at the documentary, I was looking at people's uploads saying that they were either for or against it and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I watched it simply because, you know, I was spending time with my wife and she were interested. Yeah. And after I watched the first one, I watched it because I was interested to observe how they what they said and what have you. And I just watched that. I just watched that Richard D. Hall thing about the coppers, the analysing of what the statements of the coppers. I just watched that, so that was fresh in my mind, you know, and what to look out for and stuff. And so when I watched it, I wanted to watch it from the perspective, and that's purely what I did. I watched it from the perspective of somebody trying to work out whether this person was telling the truth or not. And the more and more I watched, the more it became clear to me. And perhaps that clouded my judgment towards the end, because I was so convinced that they were lying that at the end I might have been sort of overcritical of them. But you know, there were certain things that just didn't add up. You know, and they were, even chronology wise, they were. He were talking about stuff that had happened, and then he were talking about some. He said the abuse started when he was 7, and then he were talking about something that happened a couple of years later. It was his mother, actually. We're talking about something that had happened a couple of years later, and she said, "No, he's only 7 years old," and that were her words. And I thought, well, hang on a minute, there's a lot happened in this while he's still 7, and then you realise she's talking about 2 years later.
Yeah, when he was 9.
I just put. I would just. That's all. I've got no interest in Michael Jackson whatsoever. None whatsoever. I like some of his music, and it's great. I just wanted to. I wanted to see. I wanted to try and perceive and see whether they were telling the truth, and whether I could pick out that they were telling the truth. And I could see that most of it were emotion led. But there were no emotion on their part. That's a fucking huge part of manipulating somebody. If you can make them feel emotional without presenting emotion yourself, you know, that's why these things have music on. You know, that goes. There's some music on these like shows and stuff. That's to manipulate you, to make you to try and make you feel a certain way. Now he tried to do that, but he did it. He tried to portray emotion upon people, but didn't have any emotion himself. That's another huge red flag. It's another marker. He's lying. He's not telling the truth.
Sociopathic elements. Yeah, if you're talking about something that's emotive to you, but you are blank of emotion. Sociopathy is a possible reasoning of why you're lying, basically, because sociopaths will lie with no emotion. You know, they'll do it with seemingly no emotion, even if they're lying about something that is an emotive thing. So yeah, I've not seen it yet, like I said, but I get what you mean, and definitely.
I don't know. I saw it differently though, Jace. Sorry.
Listen, that's fine. We all see things differently.
Yeah.
I try. I'm not coming from it from a point of view of I think Michael Jackson's a paedophile, or I think he's not. All that, just for me, the evidence, and when you put it all together, you're talking about these kids who've got opportunities to report what's going on and what's happening to them. And then I know that they're saying that they're in love with. They were saying they were in love with him and things like that.
Yeah.
But that doesn't work out when you see that later on that the married women. So they're obviously heterosexual. So they would have got to a point when they got to adulthood, when they realised that what happened to them was wrong. But when they were put on the stand at his trial, when they were 21, they still denied that anything happened. Then you've got the Macaulay Culkin factor, because Macaulay Culkin was involved. And Macaulay Culkin, when the Oscars were on at the last Oscars, he was tweeting people who were paedophiles. Such and such is a paedophile. There, I've said it. That sort of thing about these Hollywood people that were on. He maintains to this day that fucking Michael Jackson never did anything to him. Now, for me, somebody who's so fucking prepared to like toss out a name and say that's a paedophile is gonna, if he's suffered abuse himself, he's gonna say sorry, okay. He's gonna say something.
Hey, you can swear all you want, man. I don't stop people swearing.
Oh, sorry. I know.
You fucking bastard. Swear whatever you want.
You forget, but listen, it's great that we can disagree, and that's that.
It certainly causes controversy, doesn't it? These sorts of things, when these this type of, like I say, they throw it at you. They make you sort of like, like I say, I think demoralize you as well if you were a fan or whatever, and you see a lot of people reacting, because they feel sort of like no, they've got to defend them or whatever and all the rest of it. But again, we don't know for sure exactly who wasn't there, but just the actual evidence you see, or you just, I don't know, you just seem to spot. And
Well,
2005, he was not a right guy. He was, and look at what he did to himself. Look at the mess he was before he died. I mean, the guy was a complete wreck. You know, if you looked at the pictures of him a few years before he died, he looked hideous. So
his own psychology had been fucked up. Yeah, he believed his own illusion, and he was trying to mold himself into that illusion. But the other thing I wanted to mention is, if people are interested in this kind of topic, and another documentary is worth watching, is called An Open Secret, and it goes into the kind of Hollywood paedophilia rings and stuff like that. And that's old now, isn't it? That's got to be nearly about the same time, 10 plus years old, 15 years old, something like that. I think come out in the mid noughties or late noughties, and probably around the same time as the Michael Jackson trial was going.
There's also, Cookie, there's also a film online called Star Suckers, and I think it's from 2008. So it's 10 years old, but it really shows how much people will allow the kids, how much control over the kids people will allow just for the sake of entertainment. It is a really good, it's called Star Suckers. Find it online. It is a really good film.
For the chance of fame and fortune.
The price you pay or could pay.
Well, that's the. I'm not going to bang on long for this because it's about time to wind up anyway. I was just going to say that's that. I've called it before, the feeding the virgin to the dragon. The dragon promises you riches, fame and fortune, but it costs you a certain price. And in one way or another, a lot of these celebrities, whether, it might not necessarily be paedophilia, but there's almost always a cost to them, either personally, directly, or in their family. That they end up having to lose something in exchange for the machine, the PR men and the industry and whatever, giving them that leg up to superstardom. All of them have been, I shouldn't say all of them, that's too absolute, but a large number of them have been messed up in some way or another.
Well, there's an example in Star Suckers where they've got this little lad. There's this couple and they've got this young lad, and he must be about 5 or 6 or something like that. And they're trying to get him into commercials, and they drive 8 hours for a 3-minute commercial audition. They go in for 3 minutes, come out, and then drive 8 hours back. That is what we're talking about. This is how far people will go simply because they're trying to get a leg up onto. I mean, I've really, because that's a 2008 documentary. So I really wonder where that kid is now, because it's going to be 10 years on. He must be. He must be become a teenager by now. So
let's hope he isn't working in a supermarket like Zamo. You remember Zamo?
Yeah, I remember Zamo. Yeah, drug it.
And somebody asked a similar kind of question, and they went and found him and did a kind of little documentary about him. And now he works in a supermarket. Well, this is going back a few years. He's working in a supermarket somewhere. At least he sort of cleaned himself up a lot, but he's not fame and fortune anymore. He's just living an average life. So.
And a much better life, I'll imagine, as well.
Yeah,
Because don't worry about anything like, his reputation and any like that.
Right, I'm going to wind it up because we just come up to the hour. It's 2300 hours, 11. So it's 11 of the 11th. Oh my God, get all your Illuminati numbers together. Have a quick scroll through. I think I've said hello to everyone. Most people, I will have a quick scroll down just to make sure. But Authentic Human Programming asked me, is there a place where some of your viewers gather, like a Discord or other platform for sharing information? Not that I know of. If somebody else is running something like that, it's not me. I haven't got anything like that going on. No. The only thing I had was that Google Plus page, and since the Google Plus is now defunct, that's gone. I may at some point try and set something else up, but I'm not very good at doing the level of multitasking required for this modern environment of multi-platform interaction stuff. Yeah. So I'm not all over all the other platforms and stuff like that. Like a lot of people say, you know, you can find me on this one and this one and this one and this one and this one. No, I haven't done anything like that. I'm sticking with the YouTube for now while they are not accosting me. You know, as long as I can keep doing what I'm doing, then I'll carry on doing that here. If they start trying to crack the thumb screws down on me in some fashion, then yeah, I'll more than likely set up something somewhere else. But for now, no, there isn't. So hello to everyone in the chat room. Thanks for joining in and participating. I always read through the chat, not tonight, but probably tomorrow or through the week. I will at some point read through. So thank you for joining in. If you are, it's not a requirement, but the chat room's there for you to join in if you want to. Hello, I'm sure I saw, yeah, Lauren V. Hello, Zero Infinity. I chatted with you on Jeff's show on Friday. Hello, mate. I'm glad you found it. Blazing Stars. Hello. And I know I saw some others. Mickey Finn. Hello. Mickey Finn. You don't want too many Mickey Finns or you'll be on the floor. I don't know, I said hello to all of you lot. Scrolling down. Yeah, I think I've reached about. I think I said hello to Patrick Nee. Hello. I think, yeah. And James Owen. Hello. James Owen was hiding until the end there, lurking in the background. But I'm glad you're still there listening, mate. Yeah, like I said, the chat room's there if you want to join in. It's not a requirement. It's just there for you to make use of if you want to. So thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for listening, giving us your attention for a couple of hours. Raconteurs News, you'll be on again tomorrow night, yeah, on Tuesday night, starting 7 p.m. GMT. We'll be back with Reality Chat on Wednesday night on the Reality Chat channel, starting 8 p.m. GMT. I noticed Steve Tagoose didn't do a show on Saturday, so I'm not sure if he will be on this Saturday, but you know how these things go. Sometimes you can't make it or there's technical issues, whatever. So if you're interested, tune in on Steve Tagoose's channel on Saturday. He's usually starting 10 p.m. GMT on a Saturday night for the mystery show. And yeah, now I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to shut up and say good night.
Cheers, Cookie.
Thanks again, folks. Thanks for joining in, guys, and having a chat. Thanks to Gary. I know we had to drop out earlier, but we'll see you again soon. Catches.